Let's get to our member segments. Today we're going to be talking about competition. What is competition the way you're talking about it, Jennifer? What are we talking about here?
When I talk about competition for me,
Yeah.
competition means that each player has a fairly equal chance of winning a game based on their skill set.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Versus, competition, let's just get to the most basic game, tic-tac-toe.
Sure.
Right? And, tic-tac-toe technically is competitive because you can lose tic-tac-toe. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
But,
okay.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
ostensibly, if even moderate level of play, no one ever loses. But I get your point. Yeah.
But yeah. So, we started off talking about this a little bit, and Tom was saying all games are competitive. And anytime people say all in games, I always go to tic-tac-toe and I look at it and I say, does that work for tic-tac-toe? And I said, you know what? He's right.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, the act of playing a game is to some extent trying to a non-cooperative game. You are trying to win, and that is inherently competitive, at least at some base level. And even fully cooperative games, you are competing against the game itself.
Right, exactly. Or many of them are like that. So for me, being competitive again is that everybody can bring their skill set to the table, and depending on how skilled they are or how much they understand the game or whatever, then they can win.
Right.
And so we were talking earlier, and for me, a competitive game, it's different. I can say the mechanics, but held up as a separate entity, it's not quite like that. So the more information you have about your own position and the other player's position, the more likely it is to be a competitive game that I will enjoy. Right? The less hidden information, conversely, also means that I will enjoy it more. Although I do enjoy some games that have hidden information. Agricola, if you don't draft, has hidden information. No one knows what cards you've got.
Sure. Even with the draft, you only have a certain amount of a certain subset of information about what people have.
Right. And Winter Kingdom, no one knows the abilities that you have until you play them.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing is randomness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and random games can be competitive. Absolutely. One of my favorite games is Lisboa, and several things in that game are random.
Yep. The rubble that comes out in a particular place. Yep.
Right, exactly. But because it's perfect information, the randomness doesn't interfere with the competitive nature of the game. Now, on the other hand, when you have a game like a game I recently played, I have this card, and if this other card comes into my hand, I get 20 points. Or if a player plays a card and then I can grab it, I get 20 points. But no one knows that I have this card, and the chances are very low that I'm going to draw it. That is the kind of randomness that irritates me.
Let me see if I can. I'm going to state this in a different way and tell me whether or not what you're saying is in agreement with this. That there are games in which I am ostensibly competing against you because we are both trying to get the most points, and the most points at the end of the game wins. But the way I get points has almost nothing to do with you. It has almost everything to do with what the game has given me and how I'm using that, and solely my own work. But
also, it has nothing to do with you either.
Yes.
It only has to do with the game.
Well, no, not exactly, because you still have to recognize what the game has given you and figure out a way to maximize it and so on and so forth.
In this particular case, I was dealt a card that gave me, if I get this other card, then I would get 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
But if the game never gives me the
Card, you don't get
card,
the 20 points. Yes, got it, got it. As opposed to a game in which I am aware of the game state. And in order for me to win, I am not just simply maximizing what the game has given me, but I am also aware of your state. I can also see the opportunities that you have before you, and
right,
my play can be equally or even more so countering your moves as they are benefiting my moves. Is that
right. And I wanted to bring up some games
okay?
that express this. So, okay, we talked about Keyflower. I know we did a review, right?
Yeah, well, let's talk about Keyflower in this sense because it's an odd duck, right? It's kind of in between.
Yeah, but it's fine in using the variant. So with Keyflower, the original rules, which are still the base rules,
The
okay?
official rule still, yes.
Yeah, is that anything that you take from the boat goes behind the shield. Okay, and so when I'm playing against you, unless I have great memory, and especially if I'm playing with 5 other players who are also taking things from boats, then I don't know if what I'm doing is helping me or not, because you may have more of that color than I remember you having.
Yeah, for people that don't know Keyflower, essentially, a lot of it is, well, I'll just give a super quick description. It is essentially a bidding game where you are bidding on tiles that you are putting together into your tableau and then using those tiles to gain points. In the game, there are meeples, and those meeples are your bidding items for the most part. There are also things that can activate your spaces, but primarily they are bidding things. There are 2 ways to acquire them. You can acquire them through things being on tiles that you acquire and on these boats that happen at the end of each round, or you can acquire them by reaching into a bag and grabbing tiles out there. So, which is to say that there are both visible ways that you can get tiles and invisible ways that are hidden. And what Jennifer is talking about is that the game's base rules said that once you acquire all of these meeples, they all go into the hidden space behind your little player screen. And Jennifer this is one of her contributions to the hobby that we don't talk about a lot, but she said, no, this is not how it should be. She created a variant that is a much, 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 much better way to play Keyflower. It makes the game so much better, and it was so good that the designer Richard Breeze made it the official variant, right?
Right. I mean, it's basically there's a group of us pioneers which included Dave Eisen, who actually was the first one to come up with it. Mm-hmm. It's called Once Seen, Always Seen. So since all of us saw the meeples on the boat, then we should still continue to be able to see them. Okay, so what this does is, well, Tom only has 2 blue meeples. And so if I put out 2 blue meeples, he can't exceed my bid. So now I care about what Tom has, or what Matt has, or what Paul has,
Yep.
because I can make a competitive strategy based on that. The other thing that's really cool in that particular game about that rule is now when I can get a power or a tile that lets me go into the bag and put stuff behind my shield, well, that is a competitive advantage, right, Tom?
Yeah, not the previous version of the game left too much into, well, I don't really know what anybody else has. I got a vague sense that Trey has a lot of yellow. I got a vague sense that Jennifer has a lot of red, but I don't know how many. I don't know what their situation is, where if you have only a limited amount of hidden information, but everything that you've already seen is kept out in front of you, then I have a much better sense of I have enemy intel. I know,
And yeah,
I know the relative strength of the enemy. I don't know have perfect information, but I have relative information as to what the enemy is doing, and those decisions are just better decisions. Those are
right.
right.
More competitive. You're competing now instead of guessing.
Yes, yes. I'm 100% in agreement on that. I think that is so. Let's say that as far as some mechanics make games more competitive in the sense that we're talking about it. And when we're talking about competitive, we really are talking about player versus player. And we're not just talking about when people say player versus player, they tend to mean I punch you in the nose, you punch me
Right.
in the
Yeah.
nose.
No, no, no.
But we're
No,
not
no,
talking
no.
about it
Yeah.
that sense, right? We're talking about it
Yeah.
in much more of a general sense of I can see your plans as they're evolving, and my moves are not just moves to make the best plan I can make, but are also taking into account what you need and figuring out ways that I might be able to slow you down.
Right.
And for you and me, old school gamers, that's a common thing, and I think that's a deeper level of play when you're
Right.
factoring in what other players are doing. For you and me, I think that's just a much more satisfying version of a game. And
Yeah.
the
And
people who love roll and writes, it's probably not what you're looking for. But
right, exactly. You're looking more for the experience, which is fine.
yes,
You know, this is not to, gatekeep or anything like that. Tom and I are just talking about what we like.
yeah,
And so I'm going to go back really far back in the day. And I'm going to talk about Civilization, the board game, not the computer game, the board game,
mhm,
the original board game by Francis Tresham. And I was a co designer on Advanced Civilization. One of the things that Avalon Hill, Don Greenwood wanted was a competitive civilization game. The problem with the original Civilization is it was focused entirely on the AST. And given that the game, abstractly represented the world, right? We're talking Egypt and Africa, well, Northern Africa and Assyria, Babylon,
mhm,
Thrace. These countries actually existed, and on the board, they had appropriate geography,
right.
right?
So
Uh,
to clarify for people that don't know,
sure.
Civilization, first of all, was the Civilization video game that you've played came from Civilization. That was one of the inspirations of it. The AST that Jennifer's talking about is called the Archaeological Succession Table, and technically speaking,
Sorry.
no, no,
It's
no.
not.
No, look, you're just inside baseball, and I'm just trying to give people that that don't have
Thank you.
that don't have your breadth of experience a window into what you're talking about. So
Thank you.
I'm just gonna be your translator. No big deal.
Right.
The archaeological succession table basically worked this way. All of these ancient peoples start with a little civilization in their little corner of the map, and we all start at this one place on the archaeological succession table. At the end of the game, whoever gets the farthest on the archaeological succession table wins. But in order to advance to the next space on the succession table, you have to meet certain requirements. Certain things have to be done and have to be met. And in proper play, and by that I mean competitive play, a lot of times what that means is hurting a civilization so that they do not advance on this turn or that turn. Which is
Yeah.
interesting play, but Advanced Civilization is the game that made that kind of play much more robust.
Well, it brought competition because the way that Egypt and Babylon were implemented in the original Civ,
Yeah,
they could not meet the requirements as easily as the other countries. So they were always behind because they always had to stop to meet the requirement the next round, whereas the other countries did not. And that was a big problem in competitive play because if you had six people
yeah,
for the original, somebody had to have one of those countries, and the game took all day
Yep.
So you start at a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah. Was it really Egypt and Babylon that were
Yes, it was those two.
okay.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. So with advanced civilization, the AST just became another source of victory points.
Yes. Yeah,
And
it was no
and
longer the racetrack by which you determined victory.
right, exactly. And that brought Egypt and Babylon back into the competitive fold.
Yes.
And so, I'm just, for me, particularly, I mean, in these days, there's just, I mean, I'm sure there's some old schoolers out there still playing the original Civ, and there's many of them, like Mark of So Very Wrong About Games, who, really likes the original better than the advanced.
I still own the original. I still own the original.
Yeah, well, you have to for advanced Civ, but many of us wanted a more competitive game, and nowadays to ask someone to play a game for 8 hours, knowing that you probably can't win from the start, is a lot to ask.
Yeah, that's almost less about competition and more about a problem of balance, which in those older games tended to creep up. But more often than not, it creeped up simply because there were very few games to play, and so
Right.
we would play these games
what?
again and again,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, we would play them to the point where we basically knew that there were openings in Civilization that were as complex and as scripted as chess openings. They were,
Right.
if you're Crete, you're gonna have a slow build, but here's what you do. The first thing you do is you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this,
Right.
and that's the way that game was. It was
Right.
it was amazing.
And it just to reminisce, it's funny how people are upset with the scripted openings of Food Chain Magnate, right? I mean, for me, that's just that's how it works. It didn't bother me a bit.
No,
right?
I mean, I like very much is that they intended in Food Chain Magnate to have 3 to 4 scripted openings that were equally valid, and they found out that they actually only had 2.
Right.
And so the ketchup expansion really made a third very, very valid. Suddenly, opening with sales and advertising became a very valid strategy. And I'm
right. And that makes the game more competitive.
Yes, because simply if you have 2 starting options and each of those branch out in 2 different ways, you go from 2 to 4 to 8 and so on and so forth. If you have 3 to start, how much quicker do the variations expand? Like a crazy amount more, which is really, really interesting. Let's talk about what mechanism, in terms of the competition that you and I are talking about now, and that is being able to see what another player is doing. And one of your calculations is not just what is best for me, but also what is going to slow the other person down.
Because you can only win if everybody else loses.
That is so true, Genghis Khan. Thank you very much. So area majority, I think, is a mechanic that is inherently competitive in the sense that we're talking about it, because it it is very much a king of the hill. I see that you are winning in this area, in this area, in this area. I think El Grande has some wonderful things where a person will be getting 4 points per round simply because they have a lone unit in this small little place, and everyone is battling with 8 and 10 units in this place, and it only scores 7 points, right?
I know.
So there are opportunities in that, but there very much is the what is best for me isn't always simply what is best for me, but is also for taking the person who is scoring so much down so that I can have time to catch up.
What was kind of heartwarming, I felt, and maybe this is just a feeling, that many of the games that came out of Essen 2019 were area control. Some people say, oh, well, area control just means whoever gets their first wins. And I'm like,
Nope.
no, not today.
Yeah.
20 years ago, that might have been true. But I think area control has been refined to the point where it is way past whoever gets their first wins.
I mean, El Grande didn't have first person there wins. That's definitely not the way El Grande plays. So I think that some designs there is the first person in has an advantage. How much of an advantage depends on the design, right? But even all the way back then, it wasn't always that way. But yeah, I was. Right. I also was
like Babylonia. I was the first person at this one, villa or city or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. They just ate me alive.
Yeah, there are situations in which bash the leader and such, the first player advantage becomes a first player disadvantage to some degree.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I don't know. I happen to really like area control.
Yeah.
So I'm all in on that.
100%. Auction, I should say, is another. Auction is a mechanic that a lot of times used to be in games, and we don't see it much anymore. That may be the next thing that's due for a comeback, because auction is an interesting thing. First of all, it is a self-balancing mechanism. It takes things that are unequal and balances them because people are expending resources to put a value on them, right? Which is good.
Right.
But
I think that Power Grid is probably the reason for not having as many auctions, because it rewards experienced play. But at the same time, Keyflower, particularly if you play with my variant, the auction, you can see it, you understand it. You don't need to have played Keyflower 30 times to understand that, if I put out 3 and he only has 2, he's done.
Yeah. And it is a very competitive mechanism, right? You are bidding against other people. Only one person is going to get this thing that you're bidding on. How much more, if it's that much more important for you to have it than me, how expensive am I going to make it for you, right? Like I'm essentially handicapping your play.
What is my board position?
Yes, exactly. What is your board position, right?
Yep.
Totally. So, and of course, player elimination as a mechanism. I don't know why it's included as a mechanism. It's barely a mechanism at all, but is player elimination has largely gone the way of the dodo bird, right? Well,
it's partially because people have such bad memories of Monopoly when you're playing and you aren't going to win, but the other person playing, because they have Boardwalk and Park Place and all the greens. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of when will you be eliminated. Right. And that's bad design. Okay, yes. That's unsocial, really bad design. Right. And then you have player elimination in diplomacy, which some would say adds spice to the game, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's completely. But it is also a weird thing to the modern state of our hobby to say, all right, we're going to get these 7 people together. This is going to be awesome. Before you show up, I want you to just read some of these articles. These are strategy articles that tell you about how to play your particular power and all that sort of stuff. Just block out the day. It's probably going to take us about 8 hours to play this game, maybe more. We'll see. You come, and an hour into the game, you have been stabbed in the heart and in the back by 2 of your best friends, and you are out of the game. You've spent 4 hours studying. You played 1 hour, and you're dead.
And it's all player agency, which makes it worse.
Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, I know the other game I was thinking about, which is not competitive if you play it by the written rules. Zia, right? So if we play Zia for 3 or 4 hours and this happens and that happens, and then someone rolls 20 on the 20-sided die and they won.
Yes. You're talking about Legends of the Drift system?
Yes.
Yes.
Zia. Yeah.
No, it is a game that tries to be a game and tell a story, and in my experience, does kind of fails at both. It tries to.
I would agree.
Right? It tries to please two masters and never quite pleases either of them, really.
No, because the competitive player is like, what?
Yes. Totally agree with that. I think there are mechanics that, that don't lean towards competition in the way we're talking about. I think chaining, right? There are that chaining actions and chaining cards.
Right.
That's essentially an action that is me working my own little engine, right? And it tends to not be looking outward, looking at what the other player is doing, right?
Right, and it's very irritating in Dominion, and it's truly irritating in Dominion when they do it and it's not going to help.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Well, that's rookie play, right? Rookie play is get 20 villages and end up getting almost no points from it, right?
No, it's just passive aggressiveness.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I understand the impetus. I understand the fun of putting together a clockwork. I get that. But that's when we talk about competition, that's not what we're talking about, right? That's
exactly.
That's more of a solo puzzle fun than a group fun.
Right. Or, just to see if I can do it. And, you're like, do you realize there's 3 other people sitting here at the table waiting for you to play your 20 villages to get your silver?
Yep. Totally agree. So let's end with hidden resources, because I think that's another mechanic that tends to not foster competition, but can, right? You said that.
Right.
So to me, it seems to me that hidden resources it can be good or can be bad, but here's the distinction. If I can watch what you're doing and predict what your hidden resource, what your hidden victory point card, what your hidden condition is, then that could be very good competition, because then I'm studying you and trying to figure out the secrets that you hold, and that's great.
Well, isn't that what Through the Ages is really about?
Kind of, yeah, right? Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not just Through the Ages. There's a lot of games.
The games that I enjoy, I don't mind having the hidden objective card because they give focus to what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the good games, you aren't married to them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no.
Kind of like the hidden objectives in Marco Polo, right?
Yeah. Or Troyes, right?
Yeah.
Troyes has that hidden thing. And Troyes is a good example, because when you're playing, and you actually, both of them are, I can see where you're building, where you're building in Marco Polo. I can see the things that you're focused on in Troyes. And if I'm paying close enough attention, I'm like, wow, he could have gotten more points doing that other thing. Why did he focus on that thing? Oh, I think he has that scoring card. And in that particular game, in Troyes, the cool thing is that the secret victory condition card that you hold counts for everybody. So by paying attention to what they're doing, it
means something.
Yes, you can draft off of it, right? You can.
Right. But the other thing about objective cards is that you have it, you kind of get started, and then you see an opening, and you go, if I go that way, I lose the objective, but this is the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to take. And I probably will get more points than the objective card.
Exactly.
Those are great moments, by the way.
100%. Those are some of my favorite moments. I'm really glad that you brought up competition, because it's almost one of those topics that you think, well, of course games are competitive. What is there to say about it? But there actually was quite a bit. Thank you, Jennifer.
Tom is very, very competitive. But I like that in Tom, because we can sit down and we know what we're about, right? You know what I mean?
Is there an undercurrent of character assassination going on in this podcast, where every episode somebody feels the need to cut me down?
Be who you are, just like Kobe Bryant said. Be who you are.
Oh, so funny. Jennifer, thank you. That was a great segment. I really, really liked it.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.